Hello, I'm Mark Sumner, host of the Untitled Chapter podcast show, and today I have the privilege of having Nikki Wilton, sales leader of many companies: Unisys, Global Crossing, DXT Technology, Exchanging. How are we doing, Nikki?
I'm doing great, Mark, and it's lovely to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, thanks for coming in. So, Nikki, obviously, while we've asked you onto the show, we're doing a series around women in technology. And I know you're a big advocate of that. I know you do courses around the women in leadership, and you've been pretty active online around it. But I wanted to get some views on you you're a judge of the Women in the Women in Sales Awards, and obviously it's great that we're celebrating and promoting women. But I want to sort of get your views on what actually value do you think the awards promote to the industry? Because do they actually promote women to come into our industry, or do they sort of potentially further segregate them?
It's a big question. And actually, Mark, I'd be lying if I said I don't get all these questions from men as to where are the men in sales awards, Nikki, and why aren't we recognised? But I think if you look at women and you look at how women socialise, lots of women have kids, lots of women have far more time pressures than men at work, and lots of responsibilities around schooling and all of those good things. Women tend to they network very differently to men. So if I'm a man, I might go for a few pints after work. I might go and have a round of golf with you. If I'm really lucky, I might go on a ski trip, or I might do other stuff that gives me that whole networking piece.
Yeah.
For lots of women, that bit is really, really difficult. And it's a real challenge to arrange childcare and all those bits and pieces that go alongside it. So women's networking events are important because they give women the opportunity to build a network. They give women the opportunity to find mentors outside of their existing businesses. Quite often there's an educational element to those events. So they'll cover topics like presence and confidence and all of those. And I also think, particularly in tech, it's very difficult to measure yourself against a female peer group because there aren't very many of us. So it also gives us all the ability to see what fantastic looks like from a woman's standpoint, and to see those role models that we might not necessarily see across our business.
Yeah. Do you think, it's well documented, I think it's say 15.9% of women in technology. And without being crass when I say this, does it really matter that it's just that low? Is it really that important that we have to get it up to sort of 20, 30% or 50%? That puts me in the shop window to be sure of. I wasn't sure why it was important. When I heard the stats, I was like, are men thinking that's important? I don't know if they think they are thinking that. So, why is it important that we start getting more women in technology?
So firstly, if you look at our world today, particularly in the current environment, technology is absolutely critical to every single industry. It's not just tech. So if I go and work in retail, or I go and work in manufacturing or construction or any of those things, technology is going to be a core tenet of whatever job I do, unless I'm out there doing a manual role. And the same goes for government and public sector jobs. So tech is really, really important, first point. Secondly, jobs in technology, as you probably know, because you recruit lots of men and women for jobs in technology, they pay well. And oftentimes I think from a woman's standpoint, circumstances can change. You might find yourself on your own through no design or plan, but actually being able to earn as much money as you're possibly capable of is also really important, and technology pays well. I think the third thing is, if you look at the statistics that McKinsey quote, and McKinsey did a huge amount of research on successful, profitable businesses, McKinsey came back with the opinion that for every 10% of women in your leadership team that you manage to increase, you will improve your profits by between 2 to 4%. And you show me an organisation that doesn't want to do that. And in fact, McKinsey, in terms of their diversity at the top, they have over 30% of women in their senior leadership team, which is a massive percentage in comparison to the rest of the market. So does it matter? I think you get diversity of opinion. I think you also have potentially the opportunity to grow your profits. And then lastly, 80% of women are the consumers in a household. So they make the buying decisions. If your business is not taking onto account women's needs and they're the purchaser, how are you going to be successful?
Yeah, because it's interesting, because when I look into this, I've had this going for about 4 or 5 weeks now. I started to sort of think, well, what was the sort of the women in technology? What was the communication? What was the message they were trying to get across? Was it equal opportunities or equal outcome? I.e., is there an argument that women have the same career opportunities in IT, or they have the same opportunities? They just don't want to go into tech. They're just not interested in selling tech or being a coder or being a techie or being a help desk operator. Maybe they just don't want to do it. So is there a point where actually we're potentially discriminating, dare I say, men, not to have those opportunities? So what's your view on that? What's the message we're trying to communicate here?
So what was that stat you started with? Was it only 15-point-something% of women in tech?
Yeah, 15.9%. And it's been like that for 10 years. It hasn't changed. It hasn't gone up. It hasn't gone down. 60% of women are in technology.
Okay, so that would leave us, 85% of men in tech. So I think the risk of men being discriminated against based on that hugely overwhelming statistic, Mark, is probably a little bit unlikely. So that would be my first thought. I think secondly, you talk about equal opportunities, kind of equal rights. I think for women, and as you acknowledged, I've run courses for women in leadership right the way across the industry for the last 6 years, and I have been blown away by the impact those courses have had. So it's kind of my side job, my weekend job. It's something that I spent a lot of time doing because I couldn't believe the difference that those courses make in terms of the way women think. So there won't ever be equal opportunity if women don't understand how they need to promote themselves and how they need to develop their confidence and how they need to manage their work life and how they need to focus on their social media profiles in order to be even considered for those jobs. And I think there's one TED talk for me that actually tends to deliver that sort of magic minute of realization for women. And it's called The Missing 33%. Last time I looked at it, it had 4.5 million views. And it's probably gone up 1 million on account of the fact that I do talk about it quite a lot. But women have a tendency to talk about the things that they do in a role. What they typically don't do is talk about the things that they've achieved and promote the things that they've achieved. And the impact of that is it means that they don't get considered for roles and jobs because obviously women don't put themselves forward for those roles and jobs in the same way that men do. And then just on the last part of your question, you talked about, techies and programmers and people who do stuff with code. I think the tech industry as a whole has got a bit of a branding issue. So I don't write code. I don't have a STEM background. I trained as an actress. That's my background. So I landed in tech from Mars, in my opinion. But you do not have to be a coder. You don't have to understand necessarily how a telco network works. You don't need to understand the inner workings of a computer. What you do need to understand is how tech can completely change the world. And I don't think as an industry we talk about that enough.
Yeah. Do you think, you mentioned about women having the confidence or applying for jobs, etc. So, I'm in recruitment. If I put a job out for whatever role it is, men will apply for jobs they're not even qualified for, they've not even got any experience for, they just apply for everything. Even if they can't do the job, they apply for it. Whereas I agree with you, women don't apply for it. We hardly get any applications. And if we do get an application from a woman, she absolutely justifies exactly why she does the job. And she actually puts the bullet points of actually why she actually should apply. Whereas men just apply. They just apply. Why do you think that is? Why do you think they just don't apply for jobs that potentially they think they might not be able to do? Whereas men just apply for everything, even if they can't do it.
Yeah, and it makes sifting through their applications much harder, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's another stop topic.
So I think, I think there are a few reasons for that. I think women often move a lot less around companies than men do. So if you know that your job is manageable, you can manage your work-life balance, you know what to expect every day, you know that you can do your job, that's a comfortable place to be in. And I think women move far less. I think the issue and the risk for women in that space is it means you don't get the pay rises. It means that the chances are your pension will be significantly less than any of your male peers because you won't make those jumps as regularly as you should do. And I think from a woman's standpoint, women want to know 100% that they can do the job before they push themselves to take the next leap. So from a leadership standpoint, I think it's down to us to tell women when they're ready for the next move. And Capgemini do a lovely, lovely job of that. That's part of their program. When they hire women in as part of the performance review, they'll sit down with a woman and say, you are ready for your next move. We're going to work out what that looks like. Over the next 6 months, we're going to identify some roles that we think you're going to be fully capable of doing. And actually, we're going to give you a really big push to go and do those jobs. And at Capgemini, that's making a difference. So it's, we can all talk about women in leadership and STEM subjects and all of that good stuff, but sometimes women just need to be told.
Do you think, you mentioned about the gender pay gap there, and I'm interested in getting your views on that, because, have you experienced yourself and how would you advise women to handle the situation? But my own opinion is they just don't ask. Men ask for pay rises all the time. They're always pushing, whereas I feel like women aren't asking for pay rise. Do you think that's contributing to the gender pay gap, or is it something underneath that?
So if there's any women listening to your podcast, and let's hope it's 50-50 in terms of your diverse audience, Mark, if there's any women listening to this podcast, what women don't see is the number of requests men make for pay rises. So ladies, if you're listening out there and you're going, oh, well, I haven't asked for a pay rise for the last 18 months, I guarantee you that every single male on my sales team asks for a pay rise at least once every 2 months, and probably once every 2 weeks. And if they thought they could get away with it, they'd ask for a pay rise once every 2 days. And, because they build up that pressure, chances are when pay rise time comes around, you're more likely to give the pay rise to the person who's been really pushing you than you are perhaps to somebody else who really deserves it, just to be honest, to get them off your plate. So I think that's number one. Secondly, I think women just don't know how to go about asking for a pay rise. So there's different schools of thought in terms of, so men can just go in there and say, hey, I've done this and this, and therefore I'm worth X, Y, and Z. Women have a tendency to ask for a pay rise without doing the research. So what does your peer group look like? There's loads of market data out there that will tell you, what people doing similar jobs are currently earning. So you can go and look at that information. There's lots of received wisdom on Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In websites. There's some great videos on there about how to go about asking for a pay rise if you're a woman. So it's not the same as you ask for a pay rise as a man, because actually you can come into a situation where people resent you asking for a pay rise. So you're more likely to get a no if you're a woman. And there are some little tricks and tips to get you around that. So go and watch the video content. It's well worth watching. And then thirdly, I think there are women leaders out there who also don't ask for pay rises. So I had a woman on a course. She'd been working with our company for 33 years. She sent me an email saying, I've just been on your How to Get a Pay Rise course, Nikki. It was massively empowering. I have never asked for a pay rise in 33 years.
That's nuts, isn't it? It's absolutely nuts. If a guy had heard that, or anyone hearing that, not letting it go, that's absolutely crazy. 33 years.
But women don't see it like that, Mark. But that's part of the problem. So women think, if I work really, really, really hard, somebody's going to notice how brilliant I am, and they'll give me that pay rise. So not all women, by the way, I'm overgeneralizing here. But, you know, if those are the women who are managing other women further down the track, if I was to make a request for a pay rise to that lady, how do you think she's going to receive it? Well, I've never had one. Why should you get one? Yeah. So there are all these biases, and we're all biased, whether we like it or not. So you'll be biased against males and females. I know that I'm moderately biased towards men, and I'm very aware of it. So the more aware of it you are, the easier it is to manage judgments.
Right. So let's say we get more women into the industry, right? We get more women into the industry, into the technology. But the facts are, even if we get more women into the industry, it's a very low percentage of women get into leadership. That is a real fact. They just don't seem to get up the career ladder. So once we've got them in here, why are so many women leaving the technology on their career journey? Why? Once we've got them in there, they're on the ladder, we've got them into the industry, but yet after a while, they just go out of the industry anyway. They're as much as we're getting them in there, they're leaving.
So that's a really good question. 56% of women quit their career in technology round about mid-stage. So between the ages of about 40 and 50. And I think for me, and if I look at the stats of organizations with those big percentages of women in senior leadership positions, and I look at the packages and the benefits that are on offer, my assessment would be that the companies who offer flexible working, they offer good maternity packages, they are very focused on women having a voice, they push women to get them promoted. Those companies are far more successful at keeping their women.
Yeah.
Other organisations, so, you know, and I did do quite a bit of poking around in the gender pay gap stats before this call, and there's one company who hires 55% of women, they're left with 18% in their senior leadership team. You know, that's a catastrophic statistic. And I think unless we as leaders take responsibility for coaching women through that journey, telling them the things that, you know, you don't know because actually nobody told you. And if you don't know about something, you're never going to think to do anything about it. We need to be proactive about coaching women through the things that are likely to hold them back.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I'd be interested in hearing your perception of the industry before you joined, because it almost feels like you've got into it by mistake. You know, you said you're an actress and you fell into it. So do you think there's a real perception of like people coming into, if they are women, they just stumble across the industry? So give us your perception of before you joined.
So I think first thing, I think consulting companies, women make you know, like the Deloittes of this world, they make a decision that that's where they want to work. In my case, yeah, I did stumble on the industry. It was never an absolute intention. But I think, you know, the power to change a business through the application of technology, to drive profits, to make customers happy, to do things differently, to take cost out, to transform customer experience, for me, and to change the way that healthcare works, for example, it's the biggest gift in the world to go and have a conversation with a client who's got a business problem, and you can say, well, have you looked at this technology over here? Because I actually think that might meet this requirement and that requirement, and it could be a game changer for you. For me, that's what keeps me here. It's the excitement of all that new stuff coming down the line.
Yeah. Do you think there's enough done to sort of accelerate women's careers in the technology? And if not, what would you recommend?
So do I think there's enough done? Mostly no. So I think lots of women's programs tend to get a little bit of lip service.
Yeah.
You know, oh well, you know, we need to do this, that, and the other. We need to be shown to support our women. Oh, we'll have a women's group on our Facebook page. It'll talk about baking cakes for a charity fundraiser and reception. You know, that is not. okay, so don't get me wrong, all of that stuff's important, right? It's important, but it's not about accelerating women's careers. So I think women need formal mentoring programs. I think they need formal training. I think the business needs to take it seriously. You need a business sponsor who actually intends to get it done. And I think you also need to have demonstrable outcomes from those investments. So Deloitte, for example, does an absolutely amazing job of that. But they've had a focus on it for about the last 5 or 6 years. And their focus isn't just women, it's diversity across the piece. But they spend an awful lot of time thinking about how do we make the workplace successful for both men and women. And I think they're really successful in doing that. And if you look at their profits, you know, their profits speak volumes.
Yeah, because you've touched on a point there, which I think is really relevant in our industry. I think over the last 2 years, the women's message, or getting more women in technology, has come out a lot. You know, people have been talking about women's technology. I feel, again, I'm going to put myself out there to be straight out. I feel it's really disingenuous. I feel it's almost like companies are saying, yes, we're supporting women's technology, so we're going to have this group and put it on the Facebook and put it on Twitter, but we don't really, off camera, we don't really care. Or we're going to do the put someone up for an award, but we don't really care. But we're just saying it to almost get PR and just sort of that, to say, the tick box. But there are some companies out there who really do care and actually getting the message. Like you mentioned, a couple of companies already that are being successful. How can we get the message out to the companies who are almost pretending to support it, but aren't really doing anything about it? You know, yes, I'm a supporter of women technology. What are you doing about it? Absolutely nothing. You know, yes, I want more women in technology in your firm. How many have you got? Less than 5%. You know, I would have been one of those companies. So how can we get that message and that education out to sort of say, you know, I'd actually prefer them not to say anything. I'd actually prefer them not to say I'm a supporter of it, than actually say they're a supporter of it and do nothing. So how can we get that message out and that re-education? Because I think there's loads of companies, and, you know, you've mentioned some real, you know, top companies there. But I'm talking about the long tail. I'm talking about the majority of companies in the IT industry that are saying they're supporting women technology. But quite frankly, Nikki, off camera, they don't care at all. And I know that you don't want to hear that, but that's just, I'm being genuine. They don't care. I believe they don't care.
Okay, ladies, if you're out there and you're listening to Mark, please don't give up, because I think what you've got to look like if you're a candidate is you know, go to the gender pay gap website, gov.uk, and actually, if you're applying for an organisation or you're applying for a job in an organisation, don't look at the pay gap, because that's completely misleading. Look at the management or the leadership levels across the 4 quartiles. And the 4 quartiles are junior jobs, next level jobs, and senior jobs. So they're split into 4. It's relatively simple. I can't give you the job classifications of each. And it will tell you the percentages of women in the lower level jobs, the next level up, the next level up, the next level up. Now, don't expect to see anything that's going to blow your socks off, because most of them don't. But if I look at the organisations who are successful, my guess will be that some companies will get the message, Mark. So some companies will listen to this, hopefully, and go, oh my God, we need to do something about it. And actually, if I proactively train my women, then I can make a real difference to the way that we operate. So that's first. Secondly, I think the companies who really do invest are attracting some of the best talent. So if I look at, let me see, most organizations are hiring anywhere between 20 to 30% of women. The tech organizations I looked at, and they're the big players. Google is hiring 50% women. Now, they are one of the only organizations that really seems to be focusing on that low end. Where those organizations are hiring lots of women, they're going to make sure that they've got programs in place to support women. So, I also think that there'll be a kind of watershed where the companies who do have that diverse balance will be the most successful. So a friend of mine at an IT company, a very, very large systems integrator, told me that they had been to a client to deliver their best and final offer. They were down to the last two for a huge piece of technology integration services work. The client decided that they would not use this huge company because they turned up with a team of white men. And if tech companies don't start looking like their customers, my customers are from every race and gender. Some of them have physical challenges and are far more representative of the world that we live in. If we don't look like we can have conversations with our clients, particularly in sales, then as the world becomes more aware of the gender pay gap and diversity, I think people will start losing business unless they address this problem.
Wow. Nikki, I don't want to hear that myself. That's frightening. That's frightening. That's a great answer. I love that. One thing we touched on before we started was, say, for instance, and you give a great case, Nikki, for companies to really educate themselves and change. If they want to change, one of the challenges they might have is maybe looking at job specs and they're thinking the language they're using isn't attracting women, i.e., I'm looking for a new business person. You've got to be, they can't say this maybe on the job spec, but there'll be some language that they'll use. Aggressive, you've got to be a hunter, you've got to be tenacious, you've got to be a self-starter, all this sort of quite natural, aggressive male language that maybe would put women off thinking, actually, I could do that job, but I don't want to do that job. I'm more interested in collaboration and teams and working with people. So do you think there's once they've decided to actually say, yeah, do you know what, I want to do something about changing the philosophy of our business, and I want to actually address this in our own company, what little things do you think they can do to start addressing it? And i.e., one of those is job specs. What would you think else they can do?
So the job specs one is a great one, and I think there's a word checker out there that you can find on the internet that will tell you whether your job spec is gender biased or not. Never used it, so I can't comment. But if you are asking for somebody who's going to go out there and punch their customers in the face, which was the description you just gave, then you know the reality is most women are going to go, oh, that's definitely not a job for me, right? You know, women want to go and have collaborative conversations with customers about solving business problems. They don't want to be out there, you know, driving around at 100 miles an hour in their Ferrari, picking up orders. So you're right. There is a very big difference in terms of the way you word those advertisements. I mean, for me, and I suspect for anyone on this call, the best way to get your next job or to get your new job, or for me to find recruits in my current situation, is to do that through my network. And women typically are not the world's greatest networkers because of the constraints that they have on their personal time. So if I'm doing stacks of childcare or loads of housework, you know, the reality is I'm not going to have as much time as that. I think there's some advice there for women that says, if you have not made your LinkedIn profile as phenomenal as it could be and should be, you need to stop right now and put that on your priority list for this week. Because if you are looking for a new job, that's the first place people like Mark probably go surfing and searching.
Absolutely, yeah.
The next thing that happens is people like Mark will phone you up and go, I want a really aggressive salesperson who's going to go and rip off their customers' clothes and sign orders. You know, but what happens is lots of women say, actually, no, I'm not interested in moving right now. Women don't even have the conversation. So there's a shift that's required from women, and women need to understand that actually if they don't have those conversations, girls, it's us that we disadvantage. It's us that we're the ones who earn less. That's a fact. So even though I say, well, you can't really rely on the gender pay gap stats, actually, you know, the chances are you're not paid as much as the guy who sits next to you doing the same job, because that's the current reality. But if you don't take responsibility as a woman for earning that money and driving that change, this society and the status quo will never change. So for me, The stuff that I do with women is all about how women can take charge and ownership of their careers. You know, the world's not going to change. Bias isn't going to be any different. Recruiters are out there trying desperately hard to pick the phone up to women. As a woman, you got to answer the phone and say, yeah, I'm interested in having the chat. Most women say, no, I'm not really interested in having a chat right now. And you know what the impact of that is? Kantar, who are massive, did some research on women's finances. A woman at pensionable age typically has 60% less in her pension pot than a man.
Wow.
So who's fooling who here? It's not all about companies taking the responsibility. As a woman, you have to take some responsibility too. And you may have grown up in an environment where, you know, I did. My mum was a housewife. That's what she did. I grew up with no real expectations in that space. But if you don't take responsibility as a woman, no one will take that responsibility for you.
Oh, that's just worrying myself, Nikki, now hearing that about. My last question, Nikki, and I think you're a great person to ask because you're running those leadership courses. What advice would you give one of the listeners who is maybe looking for their next promotion, but they're not quite sure how to promote themselves or go to their boss and get it?
Okay, so a couple of pieces of advice, and I think I mentioned this before. Go and listen to The Missing 33%, which is a TED talk by a lady called Margaret Heffernan. It's 18 minutes. You can do it while you're doing something else. So go and listen to that. Secondly, think about how you promote your achievements and think about that in bite-sized chunks as a woman. So, you know, you've been at work all week, probably not right now. You were at work all week last week. What tangible achievements did you make last week? So what did you actually achieve? We can all sit at work all day for 8 hours and achieve nothing. And sometimes feel like we did sit at work all day and achieve nothing, but write those achievements down. So women are not good at promoting the successes they have a tendency to write down what they do, not what they achieve. So think about writing down those achievements. Go and find yourself a mentor in the business. Ideally someone you like. So you're looking at your next promotion, you'd really like some help and support. Would they mind giving you 45 minutes of their time to just talk through, you know, here's what you've got in your CV, this is where you think your next step is, what do they think? And if you find somebody more senior in the business, the chances are they will help you get there. I have never turned down a request for mentoring. I've never said no. But you'd be amazed, Mark, by the number of women who just don't ask.
Nikki.
And I think that's true of men. It doesn't need to be a woman. You know, go and find a man you trust. Ideally, make sure it's someone you like, and go with a problem. Don't go with a, oh, well, I kind of want this and I think I want that. You know, go with I've looked at my CV. These are the skills I've got. This is my next level of job. I think I might have a gap here. How can I close that gap? How can you help me?
Nikki, it's been an absolute pleasure. I know the listeners are going to get loads out of it. Thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you very much, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us and listening to another episode of our Channel Chat podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard and are listening on iTunes, please could you give us a review and subscribe in order to get the newest episodes as soon as they're released. Otherwise, as always, we release an episode every Thursday at midday, so hopefully you can join us then.